Welcome to Flow with Arman Assadi. Hello, my beautiful people. Hello, hello, hello. I have a conversation for you today that is very aligned with the theme of this show, possibly the most aligned episode as far as the overall theme of flow, because today I have the co-founder of the Flow Consciousness Institute here for a conversation. I was going to say in the house again. Fuck. One day, or maybe not. Will we ever again have a steady stream of in-person meetings? I really don't know. Who the hell knows? No one knows anything anymore. Flow Consciousness Institute, back to what matters. So this is very important because in episode number 9, Michael Dash mentions a process of really a transformative event that he went to. And it was actually an event in Bali at my guest's retreat. And that guest is Jackie Knechtel. And again, she runs the Flow Consciousness Institute. And you will find that there is so much in common between our vision, our understanding, our fascination for flow. And I love the way that Jackie and her company really look at the concept of flow, because it's so much more than just the psychological aspect of it. She, in and of itself, as you can see, in the name of the company, Flow Consciousness. So we start there. We really start by uncovering what flow consciousness is. And one of my first questions is, what does it look like to arrive at one of your events, whether it be virtual or in person at a retreat? What does it look like on day one? What is the process? What can a person expect? And so what I really wanted to create for you today was like a sense of getting an abbreviated Cliff Notes version of attending one of her events. And this was a very deep conversation that went into some really, really awesome stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed it myself. There's so much to take out of this conversation. You can watch Jackie herself go into flow as we're having this conversation. And there's just a great balance of both psychology and spirituality in this conversation. So kick back, enjoy. And as you're listening along, if you aren't already subscribed, I need you to subscribe. You got to subscribe. Go hit the subscribe button. And I'm going to say it because I recently looked at my analytics, and listeners are one thing, and that's nice and all, but I need every listener to be a subscriber so that you can get updates when my episodes drop, currently on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All right. Sounds good. Let's do it. Here it is, the conversation with Jackie. Let's go. Jackie, I am very appreciative of you making time, and I have to give a shout out to our dear friend and your student, Michael Dash, for connecting us. Like I was just telling you, when I first met Michael, who, by the way, has been on the podcast for people listening. I don't have the episode number in front of me, but I want to guess something like number 9.
My favorite number.
Just search Michael Dash. It was an amazing episode where I think it would accompany this one very well, because you can see the impact that your work, Jackie, has had on an individual. And he very proudly often proclaims that your work really awakened him. And like you just said, dedicated a chapter in his book to flow and to this work. So I am very excited to connect with you for those reasons, but also one more reason. We both seem to have a very similar perspective on flow. And so many people that understand the psychology of flow have issue with it, in the sense that while it's an incredible high when we attain it, it is quite fleeting. And we often access these states, sometimes accidentally, sometimes intentionally, for those of us that understand what we're doing and how to get into flow. But at the end of the day, the state in and of itself is fleeting and transient and temporary. And here you are, having created something called the Flow Consciousness Institute. And flow consciousness is a very different take on this, and one that I hold very dearly as well in my own way of approaching my life. So what is flow consciousness, and how does it differ? What is your philosophy here when it really comes to flow?
Yeah, thanks. I love that you're on board and aligned with that. So flow consciousness is more of a stage development model than a state. So most people talk about flow states, and they're exactly like you said, these fleeting, temporary experiences, non-ordinary states of consciousness, that experience where you're in the zone and time stands still and you have expanded creativity. And there's absolutely overlap between flow states and what we call flow consciousness. But flow consciousness is more a psychospiritual stage where you actually live in flow. And we call it a new operating system for your consciousness that allows you to live in a more limitless reality. And what it is really essentially rewiring and reprogramming at the deepest levels of your being to strip away any of the subconscious programming, any of the things that you've taken on, the limiting beliefs, the trauma imprints, the emotional patterns that keep people stuck in unnecessary struggle and suffering and keep them,
Mhm.
having to hustle and grind, having to try to force things to make them happen, um, as opposed to really operating from their pure potential and tapping into that place where life is conspiring in your favor, where everything you want and need, all the resources you need, come to you effortlessly in perfect synchronicity. And
Mm.
life just really feels magical. And you have a profound sense of inner peace and equanimity and experience exponential growth. And it's really, once you've experienced it, there's no other way to live.
Well, I have to admit, it sounds absolutely wonderful and something that I think would just be so transformational in the world. Uh, I like that phrase, psychospiritual. Um, where did that come from? It's very interesting because I also really feel and think and believe that flow is the optimal highest state of being, is how I often refer to it as well. It really can be a state of being rather than a transient moment. And I really like that phrase because within that, I think it says a lot. So where did that phrase come from?
Yeah, I mean, really, our work is a synthesis of a lot of different things. So, deeply rooted in sciences, quantum physics, neuroscience, psychology, but also weaving in ancient wisdom, Taoism, Zen philosophy, things like that. And
Hmm.
so, it's really um, a lot of flow consciousness is doing deep inner work, this reprogramming, and really having an understanding of how your beliefs and perceptions are creating your experience of reality. And so we've created a whole framework around that to help people have that understanding. And really, when you're living in this flow consciousness, you're in these expanded transcendent states. So it's really,
Hmm.
and quantum physics is now proving what the ancient mystics and sages have been saying for millennia. So there's really an overlap and an intersection of science and spirituality now.
Yeah, there absolutely is. When I hear a lot of that as well, I know that myself, even this question comes up, and it probably comes up for a lot of people. It's like, how attainable is it really, Jackie? This goal of living in a moment to moment experience of flow. Like, let's say we did the work and we stripped everything down and we really got there. I mean, how attainable is it really for the average person, the average student to get to what you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually very attainable. And
Mm.
so we've created a universal set of governing principles that apply really across the board to people from all walks of life. We have students all over the world. Our last call, we had students in Zimbabwe, in Denmark, in Australia, in Bali, in the UK, really all over the world, from all different careers, all different industries, taking all different paths with all different trauma imprints and life experiences.
Yeah.
And the results are the same across the board. People have profound shifts within weeks of doing this work because it's really, um, we're not seeing life, we're seeing it through a radically new lens, a new perspective that completely and dramatically shifts everything, but then also doing this incredible deep work to really heal and integrate all of these different experiences that we've had, and things can change instantly. So there's, that's a really common belief, is that change takes a long time, and that's kind of where we start our training, is working with the beliefs that change takes a long time and that it has to be
Mhm.
hard. And it definitely can be. You can spend decades or even lifetimes doing this work.
Right.
But the invitation is there. It's really, with everything, asking, like, how could this be easy? How could this be fun and easy?
Mhm.
And I mean, really,
Questions are very powerful.
yeah. Well, because your subconscious mind starts to scan for that and look for
Mhm.
ways. But it really, going into this framework that we teach, we use a framework called BETDAR, and it's BETDAR, and that stands for beliefs, emotions, thoughts, decisions, actions, and results. And so really, the basis of our work is that beliefs are the foundational layer of reality. And so if we're holding on to these beliefs that change is difficult and change takes a long time, well, guess what that creates? We're going to have that experience, and everything is going to feel like a slog, and everything is going to be hard. And we're in this puritanical society, and we've taken on so much programming, subconscious programming around, you have to work hard to be successful, nothing good comes easy, no pain, no gain, all of these things that keep people in that belief and having that experience over and over, that everything has to be difficult, and they don't appreciate it. They don't feel like they deserve it if something was easy
Hmm.
and effortless. And so they unknowingly complicate things and make it more painful and more challenging.
Hmm. So much of this obviously comes down to the individual and the things that they control. And I think a lot of what I'm hearing is that the individual, we do control much more than we realize. And it starts at that foundational level with our beliefs, for example.
Well, yes and no. So a lot of things in flow are paradoxical in nature. So yes, we have some control, in the sense that in the way that we're perceiving reality, we're actually creating it. And at the same time, we really have no control over anything in life. We think,
Mhm.
we have control over certain things, but really living in flow is a practice of radical surrender and
Yes.
relinquishing control, really, and trusting the wisdom of life and how things are meant to unfold, rather than the way that we think things should be happening. And so there's a real letting go of a lot of the control programming that we have, because so much of that
Mhm.
is oriented around keeping us safe, this illusion of
Oh, yeah.
safety and security, and not wanting. I was a control freak before, so I totally get it. And I had this sense that if I didn't micromanage everything in my life, everything would go to shit, everything would fall apart. And so I really, to the point where I burnt out and was, getting chronic autoimmune condition and things like that, because I was really fighting and trying to control life. But what I realized is we can't even control ourselves, because we have so much of the subconscious programming that is running the show most of the
Yeah.
time, that we're not aware of. So until we really do that work, um, we have less control than we think we do.
Right, right. So maybe, yeah, control isn't necessarily the best word. I think what I'm really hearing then is helping an individual shift from this feeling of being a victim of life. And so many of us are wired to continue being a victim of life due to the circumstances, due to what happens, rather than the act of surrendering and accepting what is happening and finding peace within it. And I think
Absolutely.
we're just not taught. It's so unfortunate. It sucks. These are the basic things about life that we're unfortunately just not taught, and it takes either hardship or trauma or something very difficult or hitting rock bottom to begin the process of self-development. Those that are lucky and wise tend to start these journeys on their own before things get too difficult. And I always admire those people because it doesn't have to hit rock bottom in order to go searching for these answers and
Right.
peace. It really does.
Absolutely. And it often does. And that was definitely my path. But my purpose now is to bring these tools to the masses so that they don't have to go through, these deeply painful dark nights of the soul in order to have that awakening and to step into their true power. And like you said, so much of it is shifting that perception that life is happening to me and I'm powerless against whatever circumstances that I'm facing, and really shifting, into life is happening for me. Life is conspiring in my favor. And
Yeah.
ultimately, life is happening through me and even as me. And so, upgrading our consciousness and really taking responsibility for what's showing up in our lives and how we can shift our perception around it so then we can experience more peace, more joy, more ease, more flow. And that's, not saying like this is not taking on blame for what happened, whatever traumatic experiences that you've had. It's not saying you deserve this or, your vibration created this. It's very different than that. But it's
Mhm.
realizing how powerful you truly are and that your circumstances, no matter what they are, don't dictate your future, and really giving you the tools, the empowerment tools to allow you to transcend whatever circumstances you're experiencing.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's such an important perspective. So, Jackie, let's say um, it was day one of one of your retreats. I'm really curious because, especially for those that have never done any work like this or are not familiar with the concepts or might show up like Michael did, very skeptically. He told me a lot about that. Let's say like day one, what is really the work? Or I don't know. Obviously, I know that's a whole day's worth of work, but what's the cliff notes of what's really going on, and what is the transformation that you hope takes place at the end of one of your retreats for a person? Like, what is my outcome? Is there an outcome for me? Is a better question at the end of one of your retreats.
Yeah, well, we do all different types of experiences for people, whether it's online trainings or retreats or in-person immersions and things like that. So depending on what someone signed up for, it would
Mhm.
determine the experience. But the overarching theme would really be giving them this framework, giving them this understanding of how we're creating our reality, how our beliefs and perceptions are really the foundation of how we see life. And so there's two aspects of flow that we teach, and the first part is the inner flow. And I love working with people who are really skeptical, and I was that person at one point in time. So it's so rewarding and so satisfying when someone
Sure,
like
yeah.
Michael comes in completely skeptical, and he was so funny about it
Yeah, do
too.
you remember any, particular moments?
Oh, I mean, he basically, I've heard him say this a number of times now when he's giving talks and things like that, that he thought we were scam artists. He thought we were full of shit, and really had a hard time with that, but was at kind of a dark place in his life, and
Mhm.
struggling with some really big things that he didn't know what to do. And so he got to that point of, I don't know what to do anymore. So these crazy people, like, fine, I'll give
Yeah,
them a chance. And we sat with him and we coached him around this challenge that he was facing. And he really surrendered to that and really started to apply all of the tools, the techniques, the principles that we teach to his life. And so, the first part being the inner flow is all of the internal shifts that you need to make to radically transform your perception. What we've done over the last 8 years or so is map the unconscious and find hundreds of core limiting beliefs that we find are insidious and that are holding people back in ways that they're not even aware of. And
mm,
so we've been imprinted throughout our lives through culture, media, society, religion, all of these different places that, when we're young, from the birth to 7 age range, we're like sponges and we're taking on all of this programming that is
Mhm.
shaping our beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about other people. And so, depending on what our childhood was like, and even if it was, there's experiences where, maybe your parents went away for a couple days and they left you with the babysitter. And because you were 3 years old and you didn't have the cognition to understand what was happening, you made up a story that I'm going to be abandoned. And
Yeah.
that became like a
Oh, yeah.
core abandonment wound. And it's just that you didn't have the cognition to accurately understand what
Right.
was happening. And so there's been an imprint that then repeats throughout your life, that, this fear of abandonment that will reflect in every relationship that you have, and every, business relationship, romantic relationship, and just keep manifesting itself in different ways throughout your life. So we
Mm.
have these core wounds, these core beliefs and imprints that we've taken on. Um, Even epigenetically, like the research is showing that
Mhm.
these fear patterns and beliefs and imprints are passed down for up to 14 generations in our DNA.
Wild.
So it's like if our ancestors were part of the Holocaust or the Great Depression or a famine, or any type of intense experience like that, or even it's like your grandmother is carrying the basically the eggs that are you,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so in that experience, like whatever experience, your grandmother had, your mother had while you were in the womb, like we take on all of these different imprints. So it's really going back and methodically clearing out these beliefs and emotional patterns and core wounds that are really the lens that we're seeing life through.
Yes.
And because of the way our brains work, we have confirmation bias. And
Mhm.
so we're constantly sorting all of the information that's coming at us and filtering it according to what we already believe. And we're seeing that so much now, especially with all the news and all the
Oh,
craziness
yeah.
that's going on. It's like you scroll through your news feed and it's like, oh, well, that doesn't align with what I already believe. So I'm gonna skip that. And then, you
Mhm.
find someone that says something that you believe and you're like, oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
Mm.
And so we're constantly doing that and interpreting life through the lens of what we already believe. But unfortunately, those beliefs were imprinted at a time where we weren't really accurately making sense of the world. And so that's really the foundation, is getting into and uprooting all of that at the mental, emotional, energetic, and physical level. And
Mhm.
then we shift into, we have a 7 universal flow principles, and each one is a deep, powerful activation for really how you're living your life and what actions and decisions you're making, and really aligning you towards your passion and purpose, operating from intuition as a superior mode of processing than logic, and
Yes.
really like honing
We
that.
need that in the world.
Well, and that's it. And that's really where you start to make the quantum leaps in your life.
Mhm.
And so we've been really going deep into intuition and this intuitional intelligence that we all innately have. We all come into the world with this fundamental biological wiring that's our way of making sense of the world. And again, when we're small, it's all often conditioned out of us. We have different experiences that shut us down to being able to feel and tap into that felt sense. And we start to think things through, rationalize, use logic, which is great. There's definitely a time and a place for that. However, our rational mind is limited,
Mhm.
again, based on these beliefs and perceptions that we have. So we're only ever seeing a sliver of possibility. It's like we have blinders on. And so
Wow, great analogy.
all of the other possibilities that exist, we're not able to tap into unless we're operating from intuition. So a big part of the work that we do is really training people to tap into that and reconnect to that felt sense that
Yeah.
we all came into this world with. And that's when life really starts to take off.
With intuition, it's so elusive. And again, it's one of those things that we are not taught, but we really are beginning to see more and more people shifting toward aligning with their intuition, including people in the media and leaders and celebrities that are talking about the power of their intuition. More and more, we're seeing this expansion. So I love it. I'm curious how far you and your work has gone in that realm, because it continues to be something. It's so elusive, right? It's like, how do we take something, for our brains to understand it? It's almost like we have to make it rational and logical in order to be
Right.
able to go into it. But does that then defeat the purpose? So I'm curious how you teach that. How do you help somebody align more deeply with what their intuition is telling them? Is it by making it more concrete and tangible, or is it more through is it more of a spiritual practice and it needs to remain as something that you can't necessarily touch?
Yeah, so it's there's a couple different ways that we approach it, and really, we talk about everyone has a unique signature for how their intuition shows up. Some people get the hair on their arms will stand up, or they'll get goosebumps. For me, it's kind of like I get
Yeah.
a jolt of electricity down the back of my neck, or I just have a profound knowing, which I don't know how I know, I just know. Um,
Yes.
so a clear cognizant kind of intuition. And so everyone has a unique intuitional signature. And so
Hmm.
we train people to start really making all of their decisions from their intuition. And, throughout the day, whether it's what you're going to eat for breakfast, to what you put on your
Hmm.
body, to where you go, who you engage with, what you do on your to do list first, really tuning into that felt sensation and noticing if it feels expansive and energizing, light, open. That's your intuition telling you yes to make that decision and move forward with it. And that's the decision that's going to align you with flow. And if you're experiencing something that feels contracting, restricted, dark, heavy, something like that, that's your intuition telling you no, that's not the move to make. And
Hmm.
so getting clear on how it shows up for you, really getting in your body. So anything that's an embodiment practice, moving your body, doing yoga, meditation, dance, just anything that's getting you out of your head and into your body, so you can start paying attention to the subtle felt sense, that subtle energy that's moving through the body. Also, um, really, the more we detox the body from environmental toxins, like, we were just talking about Bluetooth and EMFs and Wi-Fi, and anything that's interference in the nervous system is going to block your access to that felt sense.
Hmm.
So the more pure your actual physical vessel is, the more you're going to be able to have access to this,
Great point.
higher extrasensory awareness. And that includes doing the inner work to work through the different energetic blocks and the trauma imprints and the limiting beliefs and things like that, because we store so much of that in our physical body and in our energy body. So as you're doing that, it clears out the meridians, the pathways, so that the energy can move and you can actually tune into it more. The thing is, like, so many people are numb or numbing themselves through, whatever addictions and compulsions, and, whether it's TV or alcohol, drugs, sugar, caffeine, whatever it is, there's all of these different things that we're doing that actually dull our senses. And so we
Mhm.
teach people to really heighten all of their senses and do different practices that they can expand all of their five senses, but then really learning to read that subtle energy. And, reading it is the easy part.
Mhm.
It's trusting it and taking action from that place that's not always so easy. And
Mm.
that's the thing with intuition, is it's nonlinear. And this is where you make the quantum leaps in your life, because again, your rational mind can only see a sliver of possibility. So your intuition may tell you to do something that seems completely insane, and your rational logical mind will be like, nope, not safe, don't do that,
Mhm.
can't do that, you shouldn't do that, come up with all the reasons, the fear, the doubt. And so it's taking action from that place and actually trusting it.
Yeah,
That's the harder part, but
it
it's like a
is.
muscle, and the more you work with it, the more you, and that's why we suggest doing,
The little
even
thing.
the mundane things throughout
Yeah,
the
I
day.
caught that. That's very, very interesting and powerful. I can totally see the power of that. It's like if you just tune into making a decision of what to eat for breakfast based on your intuition, it becomes more like, and you follow through. You can read it and then you follow through with it and you make the decision when it comes time to decide, should I create that Netflix special? And that's what your intuition is saying to
Right.
you, and it freaks you the fuck out. I can totally understand that.
Yeah. Should
And
I
but in
leave
that
my job?
moment, yeah, you can show up and make that decision. That
Right.
really makes sense, and it's like a muscle. Yeah.
Well, and people get so stuck in the shoulds and the to-do
Mhm.
lists and what society thinks they should be doing, what other people think, that they get caught up in that fear or judgment or limitation. And so then they don't take action on what they're actually feeling that they should do. And it's
Mm,
like, well, every morning I have the same breakfast. So I'm just going to do that rather than listening and saying,
mm,
hey, like, let me check in with my body and see what my body actually wants today. And really listening, because there's so much wisdom, or so much wisdom in the body, and
yeah,
allowing that to guide us. And
yeah.
that really changes everything.
It's just so much more expansive too, and freeing. It's like anything becomes possible. Otherwise, you have those blinders on, it seems like. If you continue to make the same decisions because one day in 2009 you decided that's what a healthy breakfast is, and then you continue doing that and you think that that's what your body wants and needs, and that's what the article said and that's what your doctor said, but really tuning in to what you want that day in that moment is such a more beautiful feeling. The other thing that really stands out to me about it is that in and of itself your life becomes more of an experience of meditation because you're constantly tuning into the present. You're aware
Absolutely.
of what is possible or what your intuition is telling you. So instead of being on autopilot, your moment to moment awareness is so much more heightened. And I love that. I can hear somebody saying, though, Armand, discipline is freedom, and they might, and I hear that, I understand that. It's like, yes, have the rituals in place so that your mind is free to be creative during the times that you don't need it. Don't use up all your intuition and your brain power for mundane things. And I understand that, I understand the logic behind that, but that's a very rationally driven notion. I think that your life would have so much more beauty in it and feel so much more expansive if you allowed yourself the freedom to make micro decisions. And they don't have to
Absolutely.
be difficult, because I think what you're describing, and you can probably address this much better, is it's not really that difficult. It's not, doesn't take brain power. There is no brain in this.
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
comes
And
through you.
again, this is not to say that you shouldn't have routines and rituals and you shouldn't have discipline. It's just really allowing your intuition to inform your logical mind. And so your decision making process. So
Mhm.
there's absolute value in both, but really like tuning into what feels most expansive in every moment. And like you said, it brings you radically present. So you're living moment to moment and not just doing something because like it's on the calendar,
Right.
you feel like that's the thing that you have to do now. And we have thousands of stories, both from ourselves and our students, of how this has radically transformed their lives. And it's like, we were going to Bali a couple of years ago, and we were going to be teaching at a retreat, and a different one than the time that we met Michael. And I was like, wow, I got this intuitive hit that we should we were stopping in Hong Kong, and I was like, oh, we should host a dinner. There's a consciousness researcher there that I want to meet, and,
Hmm.
let me see if he's available. And this man is never in town. He's traveling all the time. And he happened to be there for 2 days that month. That was one
Mm.
of them. And even though it was like his wife, in his 20th wedding anniversary, he agreed to meet for dinner. And we met, and he brought a friend, and his friend was this Italian aristocrat with a castle in Tuscany who was also on his way to Bali. And he was hosting a mastermind for blockchain and crypto VCs. And he's like, I'd love for you to come and teach a workshop. And
Mm.
so, as a result of honoring that intuitive hit to host this dinner and invite this man that I'd never met, on a 17-hour layover, we were then going to speak at this event. And at the event, I mentioned that I have a desire to make a children's film. And I'm very clear it has to be a major studio like Disney. And so I mentioned this. And in the middle of the jungle at this retreat, a guy came up to me after and he said, Your workshop changed my life. I want to help you make this film. I live in Hollywood. I work in casting, and I want to introduce you to Sean Bailey. And I'm like, Cool. I don't know who that is. And he said, The president of production at Disney. So it's like, as a result, of following this one little impulse, we were then
Mm.
from there invited to this castle in Tuscany to teach workshops to these incredible social impact entrepreneurs and family offices and VCs. And I mean, it just keeps going and going. So
Yeah.
like you said, it's those micro decisions that we see that normally people are on this very linear trajectory. They
Right.
take very logical, rational steps. And so you can really predict where they're going to end up in life, roughly.
Mm.
Um, but when you're operating from intuition, anything can happen. So that one decision that I made to host this dinner in Hong Kong on a layover has now resulted in so many incredible things that I can't
Mhm.
even keep track of it.
Wow.
So it was like a quantum leap. And we have so many different examples of this, but that's just one to give you an idea of what's possible. It might say, well, that's ridiculous to go through all that trouble. You're like on a layover, you're going to be so tired and you don't even know the city. And
Mhm.
there's like all these reasons why our mind would be like, well, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, always. Our mind is always doing that.
Right. And it has a protective mechanism, right? Our minds want to
Yeah.
keep us safe and free from danger. And if we have all of these beliefs and perceptions about our safety and not trusting other people and beliefs that the world is a dangerous place and all of this, it's going to really find ways to keep us safe and in our little bubble of comfort.
Right, right. A lot of it is that predisposed wiring that is just there to keep us safe. And so much of it, I want to go back to something that I'm very passionate about. So I loved the little rabbit hole on intuition, but there's this part of the mind that uh, comes from this place that we did not make conscious decisions about why our mind speaks to us in the way that it does. And this often comes from our experiences in childhood. And one of the things that I really believe, and it's a quote by Carl Jung, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our life and we will call it fate.
Mhm.
And it is one of the most devastating things that I've ever been through and seeing. And everything that you're describing, by the way, I want to say I can now completely see the beauty of everything you're describing being psychospiritual. The way that you view flow is through a very spiritual lens, but you're also talking about going and doing very deep psychoanalysis and various types of psychological work. And you describe different modalities of doing that. One of those is sitting down and actually becoming aware of all the things that are unconscious within us, the shadow, as Jung would also say. And that is work that, again, we are not taught to do this. We wait too long. And oftentimes people will wake up when they're 50 or 60 and have a crisis and have a breakdown and wonder how they got there. How did, wait, what?
Mhm.
My kids are where? I live where? My friends are gone. Like everything just kind of seems to fall apart overnight, but it was actually years and years and years in the making of these unconscious patterns of maybe you have, I'll give an example. Maybe one of a person's complexes is that as a child, their father was very aggressive and used a tone that would always put them down, and they became very defensive in response, and so they always tried to fight back. And so the moment that you feel that you hear a person speak similarly to your father, by the way, it's unconscious, you don't realize it. The
Right.
moment that that tone shows up, your whole body just clenches up, and you close, and you get angry, and you feel the need to defend, and you get into an argument, and you don't know why the fuck it's happening to you, and you actually blackout. I believe that a person that's really in that form of a complex isn't conscious. They don't intend to behave this way. That the pain is so deep, the suffering and the trauma is so deep, and the wound was from so long ago that you have no idea it's even happening to you. So anytime I think number one hint that a person should always be aware of, and I'm always aware of, if I'm upset or I'm angry and I'm not my normal self that you see right here, right now, hint, 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 I'm probably in a complex. That means
Yeah.
that something within me has been triggered, and I'm not going to be rational right now.
Right.
You're not going to get through to me because I'm stuck in that old energy. And so much of what you're describing, so important, because doing that work, and most people would say, well, Jackie, that's going to be 5 years of therapy. Like, that's the only way I'm going to remove that stuff. And I have to say, I'm a huge fan of psychoanalysis, Jungian analysts, therapy, all that stuff. But what do you think about that notion that it takes years and years to remove those blocks?
Yeah. Well, I love everything that you said, and I completely agree. And just speaking for a moment to that, when we're triggered in the moment, it's actually triggering a string of pearls of all the experiences from that root core wound, that root core experience. And so you have no choice really but to unconsciously react in that way, unless you're doing the work to make the unconscious conscious. And then you get to respond rather than react. And it gives you the pause, and you can check in and say, hey, what's going on for me right now? And we actually give people a lot of processes to do that. And yeah, it's I've been through years and years of psychotherapy myself, and it was profoundly impactful, but it took forever
Hmm.
because I would have to wait for a situation to happen and then talk through it and keep going over it and talk about my past and my childhood and all of that again. And I got to a point where I was so frustrated because I'm like, look, I know all of my patterns backwards, forwards, upside down. I get where it all came from. Why do I keep doing the same thing?
Ah,
And
and
that's
you sometimes see like a little bit of improvement, and it's
right.
easy to regress and have a good day or a bad day. So yeah, I agree.
And sometimes it's more frustrating because it's like, oh
Right.
my God, I
I'm
totally
aware of
get
this.
so why do I keep doing it?
Yeah.
And that's really where we found the work often stops at the level of the mind. And that's where you really have to do the work at the mental, emotional, energetic, and physical level. So bringing in the somatic practices, the energetic practices, and things like that, and really giving people the tools to have that understanding. And so now I get excited when I get triggered because it's like, ooh, okay, I'm
Mm.
feeling something. There's something crunchy going on. There's an emotional experience that doesn't feel good. So maybe I'm feeling jealous, or maybe I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling stuck in comparison, or whatever it is. There's something happening that doesn't feel good. And I'm noticing how it feels, where I'm experiencing it in my body. I get to then use reality as a feedback mechanism to show me what's going on beneath the
Mhm.
hood, right? Because
Mhm.
before I had this framework, I would just get frustrated that I was feeling like this. And, in my younger years, would have totally numbed out, distracted myself, done, any number of things to not feel those feelings because they were uncomfortable and I
Mhm.
didn't want to be with them and I didn't know what to do with them. Whereas now, if I get triggered, I get to say, oh, okay, something is revealing itself. Something is coming up because it wants to be healed. It wants to be released. It's showing me something that I get to
Mm.
shift that's going to allow for more joy, more peace, more flow, more love in my life. So, we teach a mindful questioning process that people get to examine what's going on. So, we talked about how the beliefs are at the core layer of our reality.
Yeah.
In the BETDAR framework, beliefs give way to your emotions. People don't think about, like, why am I having these emotions? Like, where do they come from?
Hmm.
And, we're trying to quiet our thoughts in meditation, but nobody thinks, like, where are these thoughts coming from?
Hmm.
So our beliefs give rise to our emotional experience, which then creates the thoughts that we think, influences the decisions that we make, the actions we take, and ultimately the results that we're getting and the experiences that we're having. So you
Hmm.
take the experience, the emotional trigger that you're having, and you start to question it. You do some inquiry around it and ask, what am I making this mean about me? Right? So if
Hmm.
I'm triggered, I'll go into that. Why am I having this experience? And just keep asking why and drilling down until I get to something that feels like a core belief. So,
Hmm.
what must I believe in order to be having this experience or this emotional reaction? And then I can start to see, like, oh, I'm getting to a belief that I'm all alone, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not lovable, I'm not deserving. Like, and notice that that's at the root.
Mm.
And once we have that awareness, then we could start to shift it. A very basic entry level practice that we teach is then to find the most expansive opposite belief of
Mm.
that, right? And kind of hijacking the mechanism in the brain that's using the confirmation bias to validate everything it already believes to be true and to gather evidence of the new belief that we want to take on.
Yes.
So, for example, um, you know, um, I'm all alone or I don't belong, right? So if
Hmm.
someone has a core belief, I don't belong, they had an experience at a party and they felt awkward and nobody was talking to them. And so then they just shut down and they had this experience and they
Right.
did the mindful questioning, they drilled down and it came down to, I don't belong or I don't fit in. An experience that, started somewhere earlier in life that's created a lot of pain and suffering and impacted the way they show up in social situations and relationships and all of that.
Hmm.
And so they get to choose a belief that feels more empowering and more expansive. Um, I'm accepted. I belong. I fit in. Whatever it is, taking the most expansive opposite belief and then living as if that's true
Mm.
and taking that on, like thinking of a model of possibility. Who's someone in my life that really embodies that belief? Who's someone that really belongs everywhere and feels like so accepted and they fit in? Like, how do they show up in the
Hmm.
world? And we start to act as if that we already embody that belief. And then we look for evidence that supports that. So the next time,
Yeah.
you're in the grocery store and someone says hello to you, and it's like, oh, I belong, and finding evidence that validates and reinforces that to rewire that neural pathway. And then you're essentially recontextualizing
Hmm.
this faulty imprint that you took on somewhere in life that isn't true, that's creating suffering and shifting that. And we have
Mm.
much deeper practices that actually, goes in and does the work to excavate it permanently. But this is the practice that people could start to do. Your listeners could start to do this immediately and radically
Hmm.
start to see results. Because it's like you said, it's when the implicit becomes explicit, like really seeing, oh, okay, I'm carrying all of these different beliefs and having all of these emotional experiences, but what's creating that?
Hmm.
And dig a little deeper, and you can radically shift just from that.
What is the area that you have found most people struggle with in everything that you're teaching and the process? The area that you wish that that you think that most people come in with a strong bias, or they struggle to overcome, or something you just wish that, like, if you just got this one thing, the transformation process could begin.
Yeah. Wow. One thing. That's a great
Or
question.
7th?
Well, so I
I'm
guess,
sure you've seen a lot of patterns, you know?
yeah, there's so many patterns. And I think, for some people, it's, their deepest core woundings in relationship. For some people, their deepest wounding is around money and finances. So everyone, kind of tends to have an arena of life where they excel and others where they have more challenges. And
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to really is, the deepest core wounds that we have come down to I'm not worthy, I'm
Mhm.
not lovable,
Not
I'm
enough.
separate, so I'm not enough. Yeah. So it's this false belief that I'm separate from all of life, from God, the
Yes.
universe, whatever you want to call it. Um, that fundamental belief is the root of all suffering. And
Yes.
so disconnects us from our true power so that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. Those are the most pervasive beliefs that get in the way of every area of life. And we all have some flavor of, not completely free of these.
Yeah.
And, but it's that takes us out of our power. And so just recognizing, like what I wish we all could know, but not only know, but like deeply embody and live from the understanding is that we're all perfect and 100% worthy
Mhm.
just by virtue of being alive. Our
Absolutely.
birthright is worthiness and being inherently lovable
I mean,
because we are love.
this is a miracle that we're having this conversation, that we exist. Anything less is just a tragedy. Anything less than that perspective. I mean, this is it. It's here and it's gone in one blink. Jackie, everything you're doing is so incredible. Why? What's the deeper driving force here for you
Mm,
personally? What is it? What's going on with life? What do you really see? What is this really about for you?
yeah. Well, for me, from the time I can remember, I was a truth seeker and looking to break patterns in my lineage. I came from a family with a lot of addiction and inherited a lot of these different patterns from my lineage that I was committed to and determined to break through from the time I was, a preteen. And
We're very similar in that regard.
oh yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, I was reading Thich Nhat Hanh and studying Buddhism and Eastern philosophy and reading the Bhagavad Gita, reading psychology textbooks from the time I was in high school, and really committed to have all of it end with me. I don't know where that resolve came from. It was just like I was in so much of my own suffering that I
Hmm.
wanted it to end. And then I would say a huge catalyst in my life was the death of my brother in
Mm,
2009. And he overdosed and he,
my God. I'm
had a
sorry to hear
lot.
that, Jackie.
Thank you. He had a lot that he wasn't personally able to heal and overcome. And his death really gave me life. And now the work that I've done as a result, my own healing journey that I've been on is now, changing others' lives and even saving people's lives. We've had recently a woman with suicidal ideations basically say that this work has saved her life. And so that for me was really profound because it's a
Wow.
completion, a closing of this loop that my brother died to give other people life.
Wow.
And so he's guiding me. I've got his poker chips that
Oh, wow.
are a reminder of him. And really, he is my why, he's my purpose, and awakened me to my true nature and my divinity and my purpose. And so, yeah, it's not anything that I consciously set out to do. I mean, I was on a
Hmm.
very different path, and it all just kind of aligned in this way. And, so I mean, you could say my soul chose this, or
Yes, I
you know,
was gonna say that actually. I think that I believe that when people like you show up after generations and generations of pain and addiction, there's something grander at play. Call it your higher self or whatever you would like. But I think that there's something that's guiding you to say, enough is enough. It ends with me. And that's where the spirituality of this all, I think, really comes into play. So I do agree with you. I do believe that as well. And I just have to say, taking something so tragic like the loss of your brother at a young age, and not only creating meaning, which, with grieving, um, that's kind of one of the, when you talk to a psychologist, they're really starting to try to talk about that being part of the grieving process. Now, if you can get to a point where you can create meaning, it really helps the healing. It helps the grieving. But you've taken it even further, that it's become your purpose, your driving force. And that's incredibly beautiful. And it really, really resonates with me. And I have a very similar story, similar one. I lost my best friend very tragically. He was my brother,
Mm.
just soul level connection, like I've had with no other friend. And this was 2 years ago. He went for a swim in the ocean and never came back.
Oh,
And I mean, it was the most incredible, like, just deep tragedy. But I do this and have taken my desire to do what I do in my life to a whole new level, because he was my biggest cheerleader, and this is what he would want. And so it's incredible what you've done, and it resonates with me very deeply. And to anybody listening, I just have to say, that could be the last day of your life when something like that happens, or it could be the first. And it's very clearly for you, a new life was born that day, and now you're out saving lives.
yeah. I just want to be very clear that it wasn't always. So, like now I have profound gratitude for his passing and, the recognition of the gift in it. But in that time, it was
Sure.
incredibly painful. And, I'm still working through layers of grief that I wasn't even able to access before. So it's
Yeah.
not that, you just forget all of the sadness and grief.
Right.
That's where that
No, it
shadow
never
work
goes
and
anywhere.
the deep work goes. But when we're really shifting our perception to find the beauty, find the gift in all of our biggest challenges, because it's, I've had so many peak experiences in my life, but it's really been the valleys that have been most transformative, and the maximum growth and the maximum, gifts and superpowers have come from my biggest challenges and my biggest suffering. And so, like, really shifting into one of the principles that we talk about is radical acceptance and really trusting the wisdom of life. And so, having had that experience with my brother, I then, ended up in the hospital 5 years ago in Santa Barbara. I was nomadic at the time and didn't know what was wrong with my body. And this was, could have been a really horrible experience. And it was, in many ways. It was painful. I was alone. And but as a result, I was driving through Santa Barbara and I was supposed to meet up with this guy, Justin. And, someone had connected us and said, there's a lot of synergy in what you're doing. And I was like, hey, we should meet up. And then I ended up in the hospital. And
Wow.
as a result, I was strapped to a hospital bed for 5 days and he came to visit every day. I would have, like, maybe passed through town and, been gone the next day. But
Hmm.
because we spent that time together, he's now my business partner. And we've created the Flow Consciousness Institute and taught this work in 17 countries and have done all of this. But it's like, really surrendering to the divine plan. And like when we can see, like, okay, this is painful, this whatever experience that I'm having, I'm going to, use the tools that I have to be with the grief, to be with like all of the difficult emotions. And I'm going to surrender and trust that, there's a greater wisdom at play. There's something here for me. And that really changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, I went in, I had to have another surgery as a result, from the first one. And I was like, well, the last one worked out so well. I wonder what magic is going to come of this. And, just like having an understanding of how the mind and body are so connected. Imagine how, what the impact would be on my healing if I was excited and curious and open and surrendered, as opposed to resisting and feeling like this shouldn't be happening and angry and stressed. So, it just it's another perceptual shift that really gives profound freedom.
Yeah. Wow. One of the patterns, if there's one pattern that stands out to me the most as we've been talking today with you and the work that you've done in your personal life and the work that you're doing with Flow Consciousness Institute, the power of perspective and reframe. What you said about those bad days, those hard days, those valleys are the ones that stand out to you the most. It reminded me of a quote by Sigmund Freud. One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. Life contains that polarity, whether we like it or not. And if life was nothing but, beautiful days, we would have absolutely no context. We would have no idea. And if life was infinite and we were immortal, we would have no appreciation. You can look at that in so many different examples, in so many different ways. We need those things, actually. We need them for life to actually have meaning. And so many of us don't awaken to that or are not exposed to that. Everyone in their own time, I believe, is given the opportunity to awaken to that, to these concepts and those ideas. And this conversation could be that moment for somebody listening.
Mm.
And so I invite you to not shy away from these opportunities to really become more conscious of what's going on in your life and to follow up with Jackie because I think that the work you're doing is incredible, Jackie. And I know you're helping so many people around the world. And I have to say that, sure, there are a lot of people that are trying to leave a dent and make a difference and really help people. But the way you're doing it is very unique. And I would say to anyone that's resonating with this right now to make sure to follow up with you. So with that said, what's the best way for people to get in touch? And I would just love to say any closing thoughts that you have that you'd like to close out with.
Yeah, thank you. Our website is probably the best place, flowconsciousness.com, flowconsciousnessinstitute.com. We have free masterclass on the website. We've got a research paper. We've got a bunch of other podcasts and interviews and events. And it's kind of the home for all things flow consciousness. But also feel free to connect on the socials, Jackie Knechtel on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, I would love to hear any insights or takeaways, any shifts that people had from this conversation. And yeah, this is just, I love doing this work. I love supporting people in this way. And, it's the thing that I can't not do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Jackie. This was a really special conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. There it is. Beautiful conversation. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. Sending you good vibes, love, wherever you are in the world, wherever you're listening from. If there's anything you want to discuss about today's episode or anything in general at all, and you want to work together on any of this, shoot me a message. Check out my website, armanassadi.com. All the show notes for every episode are there, including this one and everything we talked about. All the links to resources and everything you might need will be there, as well as a contact page for you to be able to reach out to me if you want to chat about anything. That's it. That's a wrap. I'll talk to you later. Much love. Peace.